The dust on the road had turned to mud from her tears by the time Violet Lancaster realized she could not walk another mile. And the realization came not as a gentle understanding, but as a violent surrender when her knees buckled beneath her fine silk dress, now torn and filthy from 3 days of desperate flight. She pressed her palms against the red earth of New Mexico territory, gasping for breath that would not come easily, feeling the subtle swell of her belly beneath her corset that she had loosened in secret weeks ago, knowing that soon there would be no hiding what that silver-tongued lawyer from Boston had left her with before disappearing into the night with a portion of her father's money and all of her foolish heart. The sun beat down mercilessly on this September day in 1882, and Violet knew that if she did not find shelter soon, neither she nor the child growing inside her would survive to see another sunrise. Her father, Edmund Lancaster, was the most powerful banker in Santa Fe, a man whose word could make or break fortunes, whose reputation was built on the granite foundation of respectability and rigid moral certainty. When she had whispered her confession to him 2 weeks ago, standing in his study with her hands trembling and her voice barely audible, she had watched his face transform from paternal concern to a fury so cold it seemed to freeze the very air between them. He had called her a whore. The shame had been unbearable, but worse was what came next. Her father had told her in a voice like winter iron that she would be sent away to a Magdalene asylum in St. Louis, that she would give birth in secret and the child would be given to an orphanage, and that if she ever spoke of this shame to anyone, he would disown her completely and ensure that no decent family in any territory would ever acknowledge her existence. She would be erased, he said, as thoroughly as if she had never been born. Violet had run that very night, taking only what she could carry, leaving behind a note that said simply that she was sorry and that he would never see her again. She had meant to reach California somehow, to disappear into one of the growing cities where a woman alone might find work and raise a child without questions that cut too deep. But she had underestimated how quickly her father would act, how far his influence reached, and how few people would help a young woman traveling alone, who matched the description in the telegrams that had surely been sent to every town with a wire office. Now she knelt in the dirt on a road that seemed to lead nowhere, miles from the last settlement she had passed, with the sun climbing toward noon and her water gone since yesterday. She tried to stand, but her legs would not obey, and she felt a wave of dizziness that made the scrubland around her spin and blur. She thought of her mother, dead these 10 years, and wondered if she would see her soon, if death would be gentle or if it would take its time with her. That was when she heard the sound of hooves, steady and unhurried, coming from the direction she had been heading. Violet's first instinct was to hide, to crawl into the brush beside the road and pray that whoever was coming would pass without seeing her. But she could not move, could not do anything but remain where she was, swaying slightly, her vision darkening at the edges. The rider came into view gradually, a tall figure on a buckskin horse, leading a pack horse behind him. He wore the plain clothes of a working cowboy, dusty denim and a faded blue shirt, a hat pulled low against the sun. As he drew closer, Violet saw that he was young, perhaps 25, with dark hair and a face that was weathered but kind, with strong features and eyes that were a startling shade of blue-green, like river water in summer. He saw her and immediately pulled his horse to a stop, dismounting with a fluid grace that spoke of years in the saddle. He approached her carefully, his hands visible and empty, as if he understood that a woman alone would be frightened of any man on this empty road. "Miss, are you hurt?" His voice was low and gentle, carrying a slight drawl that spoke of Texas origins. "Can you hear me?" Violet tried to speak, but her throat was too dry, and what came out was barely a whisper. Water. The cowboy moved quickly then, returning to his horse and pulling a canteen from his saddle. He knelt beside her and helped her drink, supporting her shoulders with one arm while holding the canteen to her lips with the other. The water was warm, but it was the most wonderful thing Violet had ever tasted, and she drank greedily until he gently pulled it away. "Not too much at once, miss. You will make yourself sick." He studied her face with concern, taking in her condition, the expensive dress now ruined, the delicate shoes that were never meant for walking long distances. "How long have you been out here?" "3 days," Violet managed, her voice still hoarse. "Maybe 4. I lost count." His eyes widened slightly. "You have been walking for 3 days, alone." She nodded, suddenly aware of how she must look, of the impropriety of being alone with a strange man, and then almost laughing at the absurdity of worrying about propriety now, when she had already lost everything that propriety might have protected. But the laughter died in her throat and became a sob instead. And then she was crying helplessly while this stranger held her shoulders and made soothing sounds as if she were a frightened horse. When the storm of weeping passed, Violet felt emptied out, too exhausted even for shame. The cowboy offered her more water and she drank it slowly this time, and then he sat back on his heels and regarded her seriously. "My name is Ethan Zimmerman," he said. "I work for the Bar 7 Ranch, about 12 miles west of here. I have been in Socorro buying supplies and I am headed back now." "You cannot stay out here, miss. The nights are getting cold and there are animals that would see you as easy prey. Will you let me take you somewhere safe?" Violet looked at him, at this man who had appeared like something from a fever dream, and felt a desperate urge to trust him, warring with everything her father had taught her about men and their intentions. But what choice did she have? She would die out here if she refused his help, and the child with her. "I have nowhere to go," she said quietly. "I am running from my family and I cannot return. If you take me to any town with a telegraph office, they will find me and send me back." Ethan's expression did not change, though she saw something flicker in his eyes, a recognition perhaps of troubles that ran deeper than simple misfortune. "Are you in danger? Are they hurting you?" "Not in the way you mean," Violet said, and then, because he had been kind and because she was too tired for deception, she added, "I am with child and I am not married. My father wants to send me away to an institution and take the baby when it is born. I will not let him do that. I would rather die out here than lose my child." She watched his face carefully as she spoke, waiting for the disgust, the judgment, the cold withdrawal that would tell her she had been a fool to hope for anything better. But Ethan Zimmerman only nodded slowly, as if she had told him something sad but not surprising, as if the world held enough tragedy that one more instance of it was simply confirmation of what he already knew. "You will not die out here," he said firmly. "And no one will take your child if you do not wish it. I will help you, miss. I give you my word." "Why?" Violet asked, genuinely confused. "You do not know me. I could be a liar or a thief. Why would you help me?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, looking out at the desert landscape that surrounded them, the red rocks and the scrub brush and the endless sky. "My sister was in a similar situation once," he said finally. "Our family turned her out and she died giving birth in a charity hospital in San Antonio. She was only 17. I was away working a cattle drive and I did not know until I came home and found her already buried. I swore then that if I ever had the chance to help someone in her position, I would not fail again." The raw pain in his voice was unmistakable, and Violet felt her heart twist with sympathy for this stranger and his sister who had died alone and afraid. "I am sorry," she said softly. "So am I," Ethan replied. But sorry does not bring her back. Action is what matters now. Can you ride? Or shall I make a travois to pull you? Violet tested her legs and found them somewhat steadier now that she had water in her system. I can ride if you help me up. Ethan nodded and stood, then reached down to assist her to her feet. She swayed, but his grip was strong and steady, and he walked her slowly to his horse, a patient mare who regarded Violet with what seemed like gentle curiosity. He lifted Violet into the saddle with surprising ease, then swung up behind her, reaching around to gather the reins. His arms formed a secure bracket around her, and Violet felt herself relaxing against his chest, too exhausted to maintain proper distance. "The Bar 7 is a good outfit," Ethan said as he urged the mare into a steady walk, the pack-horse following obediently behind. "The owner is a man named Samuel Brooks and his wife Martha. They are decent people, and they will not ask questions you do not wish to answer. I will speak to them when we arrive and explain that you need a place to stay for a while. We have a small house that was the original homestead before the main ranch house was built. It has been empty since old man Peterson died last year. You could stay there, and no one would bother you." "I cannot accept charity," Violet said, though even as she spoke she knew how ridiculous it sounded given her circumstances. "I would need to work for my keep somehow." "We can figure something out," Ethan said. "Martha is always needing help with the household tasks and the garden. And we have a few hands who would benefit from someone teaching them to read and write proper. You can read, I am guessing." "Yes," Violet said. "My father believed in education even for daughters. I can read and write and do figures. I speak some French and Spanish. I can sew and cook, though I confess I am better at the former than the latter." "That is more than most out here," Ethan said. "You will earn your way just fine." They rode in silence for a while, the steady rhythm of the horse's gait lulling Violet into a half-doze despite her best efforts to stay alert. She woke fully when Ethan spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "Miss, I do not mean to pry, but I need to know if anyone is going to come looking for you with violence in mind. Will your family send men after you? Will the father of your child?" Violet shook her head. "The father is long gone, running from the law for theft." "My father will look for me, yes, but he will be discreet about it. He would not want a scandal. He will send private inquiries and telegrams to sheriffs and railway stations. But I do not think he would come himself or send men with guns. He wants me found, but he wants it done quietly." "And your name? What should I call you?" Violet hesitated. She had been considering this question since she fled Santa Fe, knowing that she would need to hide her identity if she hoped to avoid being found. "Call me Victoria," she said, choosing a name close enough to her own that she might remember to answer to it. "Victoria Lewis." If Ethan noticed the hesitation or doubted her, he gave no sign. "Victoria it is, then. We will be at the Bar 7 by evening. You can rest and eat something proper, and we will work out the details then." True to his word, they reached the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that made Violet catch her breath despite her exhaustion. The Bar 7 was a sprawling operation, with a large main house, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals. Cattle dotted the landscape in every direction, and Violet could hear the sounds of men finishing their day's work, calling to each other as they bedded down horses and secured equipment. Ethan took her directly to the main house, helping her down from the mare and steadying her when she stumbled. A woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron, her expression curious but not unkind. She was perhaps 50, with gray-streaked brown hair and a face lined by years of sun and hard work, but her eyes were warm and intelligent. "Ethan, you are back late," she said. then took in Violet's appearance and her tone shifted to concern. "Lord above, child, what happened to you?" "Martha, this is Victoria Lewis," Ethan said. "I found her on the road from Socorro. She has been walking for days with no food or water. She needs help, and I told her we might provide it." Martha Brooks was at Violet's side in an instant, her capable hands checking for injuries, her eyes taking in details that made Violet realize she had seen women in this condition before and knew exactly what it meant. "You poor thing," Martha said softly. "Come inside right now. Ethan, go fetch Samuel and tell him we have a guest. Then see to your horses. Shoo." Ethan nodded and left, and Martha guided Violet into the house, through a spacious front room with comfortable furniture, and into a large kitchen that smelled wonderfully of bread and roasting meat. She sat Violet down at the table and immediately began preparing a plate of food, talking in a steady, soothing stream. "You eat this slowly now. Your stomach will not be used to rich food if you have been starving. That is venison stew and fresh bread, and there is butter from our cow. I will heat water for a bath while you eat, and we will see about getting you into some clean clothes. You look about the size my daughter was before she married and moved to Denver. I kept some of her things." Violet wanted to protest, to maintain some dignity, but the smell of the food was overwhelming, and she found herself eating with desperate hunger, trying to remember Martha's advice to go slowly but failing as her body demanded sustenance. Martha watched her with sympathetic eyes and kept refilling her plate until Violet finally shook her head, unable to eat another bite. Samuel Brooks appeared a few minutes later, a tall rancher in his late 50s with graying hair and the weathered look of a man who had spent his life working cattle. He regarded Violet with the same assessing but non-judgmental gaze his wife had shown, and when Ethan explained the situation, using only the barest details, Samuel simply nodded. "The old Peterson place is yours for as long as you need it," he said to Violet. "It is small but sound. Ethan and some of the boys can get it cleaned up and habitable by tomorrow. Tonight you will sleep here in the spare room and Martha will see you are taken care of. We do not tolerate gossip on this ranch, and my men know better than to ask questions that are not their business. You will be safe here, Miss Lewis." The relief that washed over Violet was so intense it brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I will work hard for you. I promise I will earn my keep." "We will work out the details," Samuel said, his voice kind. "For now, you just rest and recover your strength. Martha, see to our guest. Ethan, come with me. We need to discuss the supply situation." The two men left, and Martha helped Violet to a small room off the kitchen, where a bathing tub was already being filled with hot water by a young Mexican woman who smiled shyly at Violet but said nothing. Martha provided soap and towels and a clean nightdress, then tactfully left Violet alone to bathe. The hot water was heaven on her abused body, washing away days of dirt and sweat and fear. Violet scrubbed herself carefully, wincing at the bruises on her feet and legs from walking, the scratches from brush she had pushed through. She placed one hand on her belly, feeling the slight curve there, and whispered to the life growing inside her. "We are safe now," she said softly. "I do not know for how long, but for tonight at least, we are safe." After her bath, Martha returned with a simple dress in blue cotton, worn but clean and well mended. She helped Violet into it, her hands gentle, and then brushed out Violet's long dark hair which had come loose from its pins days ago and was hopelessly tangled. As she worked, Martha talked about the ranch, about the rhythm of life there, about the men who worked the cattle and the women in the nearby settlement of Los Alamos, about 6 miles to the south, who came together for church services and social events. Los Alamos is barely a town. Martha explained. Perhaps 20 families, a general store, a small church. We are about 15 miles north of Socorro and 30 miles south of Albuquerque, so we are not completely isolated, but we are removed enough that people tend to mind their own business. It is a good place for someone who wants to be left alone. How did you end up here? Violet asked, curious about this woman who had shown her such immediate kindness. Martha smiled. Samuel and I came out from Missouri in '59, right before the war. We were young and foolish and thought we would make our fortune ranching. It was harder than we expected, much harder. We nearly starved the first 2 years, but we survived and eventually we prospered. We have 3 children, all grown now. Our eldest son runs a ranch in Colorado, our daughter married a merchant in Denver, and our youngest boy is studying law in St. Louis. We are proud of them all. They are lucky to have parents who supported them, Violet said quietly. Martha's hands paused in their work. Not all parents know how to love their children the way they should, she said gently. Some people are so concerned with what others think that they forget what actually matters. You are young, Victoria, and you have made a mistake perhaps, or had a mistake made against you. But that does not define your whole life. You will get through this, and you will be stronger for it. Violet felt the tears come again and did not try to stop them. Martha simply held her and let her cry, rocking her slightly as if she were a small child, and Violet thought of her own mother who had died when she was only 8, and how much she had missed having a woman's comfort these past terrible weeks. When the storm passed, Martha helped her to the spare bedroom where a clean bed waited with fresh linens. Violet fell asleep almost before her head touched the pillow, falling into a dreamless darkness that was the first real rest she had known since fleeing Santa Fe. She woke late the next morning to find the sun already high and the house quiet. On the table beside the bed was a tray with breakfast, cold now but still appealing. Bread and butter, sliced apples, a boiled egg. Violet ate gratefully and then dressed in another borrowed dress, this one in a practical brown that would not show dirt easily. She found her way to the kitchen where Martha was kneading bread dough. "There you are," Martha said cheerfully. "I thought I might have to wake you for lunch." "You needed that sleep though. How do you feel?" "Better," Violet admitted. "Stronger. Thank you for everything, Mrs. Brooks." "Call me Martha, child. Mrs. Brooks makes me feel ancient. Now I have some things to discuss with you. Samuel and I talked last night after you went to bed. We would like to offer you a position here on the ranch. Nothing too strenuous given your condition, but useful work. I could use help with the household tasks, the cooking and cleaning and laundry. We also have a vegetable garden that needs tending, and several of our hands are barely literate. If you would be willing to hold lessons a few evenings a week, teaching them to read and write better, that would be valuable to them and to us." "I would be happy to do all of that," Violet said quickly. "More than happy. It is generous of you to give me work." "We pay $20 a month plus room and board," Martha continued. "The Peterson house is small, but it has a bedroom, a main room with a stove for cooking and heating, and a small porch. Ethan and some of the hands spent this morning cleaning it out and making it habitable. You can move in today if you like, or you can stay here in the main house, whichever makes you more comfortable." $20 a month was far less than Violet had spent on a single dress in her old life, but now it seemed like a fortune, a means to independence and survival. "I will take the house," she said. "I do not want to impose on your hospitality more than necessary." "It is no imposition," Martha said, "but I understand the desire for your own space. Come, let us walk over there and you can see if it will suit you." The Peterson house was indeed small, but it was clean and solid, with a good roof and tight walls. The bedroom had a simple bed frame with a new mattress that Martha said had been stored in the barn, and the main room had a table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the stove, and shelves for storage. The stove itself was freshly blacked and ready for use, with a supply of wood stacked neatly beside it. Someone had even put up curtains on the 2 windows, simple fabric but cheerfully patterned. "Ethan brought these over from the general store in Los Alamos this morning," Martha said, indicating a box on the table. "Basic supplies to get you started: flour, salt, sugar, coffee, some tins of food. We eat dinner together at the main house at 6 every evening, and you are always welcome to join us. Breakfast and lunch you can manage here or come over, whichever you prefer." Violet felt overwhelmed by the generosity. "I do not know how to thank you." "No thanks needed," Martha said firmly. "We help our own out here. That is how we survive." Over the following weeks, Violet settled into a routine that felt both strange and comforting. She rose early and worked in Martha's kitchen, learning to cook for a large household, to manage laundry in the big copper tubs, to preserve vegetables and fruits for the winter ahead. Her hands, which had been soft and accustomed to needlework and piano playing, became rough and capable. Her body grew stronger despite the advancing pregnancy, though she tired more easily than she once had. 3 evenings a week she held lessons for any of the ranch hands who wanted to attend. Usually 5 or 6 men showed up, ranging in age from a teenage boy named Jimmy to a grizzled cowboy called Hank who was nearing 60. They were respectful and earnest, struggling through simple texts, practicing writing their names and basic words. Violet found she enjoyed teaching, found satisfaction in seeing their progress. Ethan attended every lesson, though he was already more literate than the others. He sat in the back and worked on more advanced texts that Violet loaned him from the small collection of books Martha kept. Between lessons they talked, conversations that started awkwardly but gradually became easier, more natural. Violet learned that Ethan was 26, that he had been working ranches since he was 14, that he sent money every month to his mother who still lived in Texas, though they had not spoken since his sister's death, and his mother's refusal to acknowledge what had happened. "She chose her pride over her daughter," Ethan said one evening as they sat on the porch of the Peterson house after a lesson. The other men had gone back to the bunkhouse, but Ethan had lingered, ostensibly to return a book. "I cannot forgive that. Rebecca was just a girl and she was scared and she needed her mother. But my mother cared more about what the church ladies would say than about her own child." "My father was the same," Violet said quietly. "He has built his whole life on his reputation. I was supposed to be an ornament to that, a daughter who made a good marriage and reflected well on him. When I failed at that, I became a liability to be hidden away." "You did not fail at anything," Ethan said with unexpected fierceness. "You were wronged by a man who lied to you. That is not your failure, it is his." Violet looked at him in surprise. Most men, she knew, would not see it that way. Most would say she had been foolish, that she had failed to guard her virtue, that she had brought her troubles on herself. But Ethan's blue-green eyes were steady and sincere, and she realized that he meant exactly what he said. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing that, for believing in me." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was calloused from years of rope work, but his touch was gentle. "You are the strongest woman I have ever met, Victoria," he said. "You walked across the desert alone rather than surrender your child. You work hard every day and you never complain. You teach men who most educated people would not bother with. You have every reason to be bitter and angry, but instead you are kind. That is not failure. That is courage. Violet felt her eyes fill with tears, but they were different tears than the ones she had shed before, tears of gratitude rather than grief. You are a good man, Ethan Zimmerman. Your sister would be proud of you. They sat together in companionable silence as the desert night deepened around them, still holding hands, and Violet felt something unfold in her chest that she had thought was dead forever. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it, the first green shoot pushing up through scorched earth. As October turned to November, and the weather grew cooler, Violet's pregnancy became more obvious. Martha let out some dresses to accommodate her growing belly, and the ranch hands who knew her situation became quietly protective, insisting on carrying anything heavy for her, making sure she did not overexert herself. No one gossiped or made crude jokes, at least not where she could hear them, and Violet was grateful for the respect they showed her. Ethan's attentiveness increased as well. He found reasons to stop by the Peterson house every day, bringing firewood, fixing a loose board on the porch, installing a better latch on the door. They took to having supper together several evenings a week, and Violet found herself looking forward to these meals more than anything else in her day. Ethan was easy to talk to, thoughtful and intelligent despite his lack of formal education. He told her stories of cattle drives and harsh winters, of horses he had known and men he had worked with. She told him carefully edited versions of her life in Santa Fe, describing the society parties and elaborate dinners, but leaving out the names and too many identifying details. One evening in late November, as they sat by the stove in her small house eating stew that Violet had learned to make tolerably well, Ethan set down his spoon and looked at her seriously. "Victoria, I need to talk to you about something important." Violet felt a flutter of anxiety. "What is it?" "Winter is coming on hard. We have already had 2 cold snaps, and Samuel says this will be a harsh season. You cannot stay here alone when the baby comes. It would not be safe. If something went wrong during the birth, if you needed help, it would take too long to get to you from the main house." "What are you suggesting?" Violet asked, though she thought she knew, and the knowledge made her heart beat faster. Ethan took a breath, his expression both nervous and determined. "I am suggesting that we get married. A real marriage, legal and binding. I would give the baby my name and claim it as my own. No one would ever need to know otherwise. You would have the protection of being a married woman, and your child would be legitimate in the eyes of the law." Violet stared at him, hardly able to process what he was saying. "Ethan, you cannot mean that. You cannot throw your life away on a woman carrying another man's child. What if you meet someone you truly love someday? You would be trapped." "I am not trapped if I am choosing this freely," Ethan said. "And as for love, well, I think that is something that grows over time between people who respect each other and care for each other. I respect you, Victoria. I care about you. I think you might care about me too, at least a little. That is a better foundation for marriage than what most people start with." "But the child," Violet protested. "You would be taking on responsibility for another man's baby. That is no small thing." "The child is innocent," Ethan said firmly, "and it will need a father. I can be that. I want to be that. Unless you do not want this. If you do not want me, then say so, and I will not mention it again. But if you think you could be happy as my wife, even if it is not the grand romance novels talk about, then I am offering you my name and my protection." Violet felt tears sliding down her cheeks. How had this happened? How had this quiet cowboy who owed her nothing come to mean so much to her? She thought about the nights she lay awake imagining the future, trying to picture how she would manage when the baby came, how she would raise a child alone in a world that would judge them both harshly. And in those imaginings, increasingly, She had found herself thinking of Ethan, wishing he would be there, knowing she had no right to wish for such a thing. "I care about you more than a little," she whispered. "I think I might be falling in love with you, Ethan, though I did not think I would ever love anyone again after what Charles did to me. But you are nothing like him. You are honest and kind and good. If you truly want this, if you are certain, then yes, I will marry you." The smile that broke across Ethan's face was like sunrise, bright and warm and full of joy. He stood and pulled her to her feet, then kissed her gently, a brief tender touch that was more question than demand. Violet kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. "We will do this right," Ethan said when they parted. "I will speak to Samuel tomorrow and ask his permission to marry on the ranch. Martha can help you make a dress if you want something special. We will have witnesses and make it all legal, and then you will move into the foreman's cabin with me. It is bigger than this place and warmer too." "You are the foreman?" Violet asked, surprised. "I did not know that." Ethan looked a bit embarrassed. "I did not mention it because I did not want you to think I was putting on airs. But yes, Samuel made me foreman last year after the previous man retired. It is why I have my own cabin instead of bunking with the other hands." They made plans late into the night, talking about the practicalities, about what would come after the marriage, about the baby and how they would manage. Ethan was adamant that they would tell people the child was born early, that they had been married quickly because of the circumstances, and that anyone who wanted to make something of it could take it up with him personally. His protectiveness made Violet feel cherished in a way she never had before, not even during the brief courtship with Charles that she now recognized as manipulation and lies. The wedding took place 1 week later, on a cold, clear December morning. Martha had helped Violet alter one of her daughter's old dresses, a simple gown in ivory wool that was warm and practical, but still pretty. Violet wore her dark hair loose, held back with a ribbon, and carried a small bouquet of dried flowers that Martha had saved from the summer garden. They were married in the main room of the Brooks house, with Samuel officiating using a traveling minister's license he held for just such occasions, Martha serving as witness along with several of the ranch hands, including old Hank, who wiped his eyes unashamedly during the brief ceremony. Ethan wore his best clothes, clean denim and a new white shirt, and when he said his vows his voice was strong and sure, with no hesitation or doubt. Violet's voice trembled as she made her promises, but she meant every word. She was taking a tremendous leap of faith with this man, trusting him with not only her life but the life of her child. But as she looked into his eyes and saw the steady devotion there, she felt the rightness of it settle over her like a blessing. When Samuel pronounced them married and Ethan kissed her, chaste and quick in front of their witnesses, Violet felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She was no longer Violet Lancaster, disgraced daughter of a wealthy banker. She was Victoria Zimmerman now, wife of a foreman, carrying the child that would be raised as Ethan's son or daughter. It was a new identity, a new story, and though it was born of desperation and loss, it held the promise of something better. The celebration after was simple but joyful. Martha had made a special dinner with a cake that was lopsided but delicious, and the ranch hands who attended were respectful and kind, offering their congratulations and best wishes. As evening fell, Ethan took Violet's hand and led her across the ranch yard to his cabin, carrying her over the threshold with a gentleness that made her heart ache. The cabin was indeed larger than the Peterson house, with a separate bedroom, a good stove, and furniture that was rough-hewn but sturdy. Ethan had cleaned it thoroughly and made up the bed with fresh linens. He had even put wildflowers in a jar on the table, though where he had found them in December Violet could not imagine. They stood in the main room, suddenly awkward with each other now that they were alone and married. Violet's hands moved to her swollen belly, a nervous gesture, and she saw Ethan's eyes follow the movement. "I do not expect anything tonight," he said quietly, "or any night until you are ready. This marriage is real, and I hope that someday it will be a true marriage in every way, but I will not push you. You have been through enough without me making demands." Violet felt a wave of affection for this man who was now her husband. She crossed to him and took his hands in hers. "I am afraid," she admitted. "Not of you, but of what I do not know. Of childbirth and motherhood and whether I will be any good at either. Of whether I can be the wife you deserve." "You are already more than I deserve," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. "And you will not face any of it alone. I will be with you every step. I promise you that." That night they lay together in the bed, Ethan holding Violet carefully as if she were something precious and fragile. She rested her head on his shoulder and felt his hand settle gently over her belly, felt the baby kick against his palm. She heard his sharp intake of breath, the wonder in his voice when he spoke. "I felt that." The baby moved. "That is because you are talking," Violet said, smiling in the darkness. "The baby seems to respond to your voice. It happens every time you read aloud during the lessons." "Does it hurt?" Ethan asked. "No, it feels strange sometimes, but not painful. Just a reminder that there is a whole other person growing inside me." She paused, then added softly, "Our baby now. You meant what you said about claiming this child as your own." "I meant every word," Ethan replied firmly. "This baby will be a Zimmerman, same as any child born of my blood would be. I will love it and protect it and make sure it knows it is wanted. That is what a father does, and I will be its father in every way that matters." Violet turned in his arms and kissed him, deeper this time, with the beginning of passion as well as affection. Ethan responded carefully, letting her set the pace, his hands moving over her back and into her hair. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard. "I think I could be ready soon," Violet whispered. "To make this a true marriage, not tonight, I am too tired, but soon." "Whenever you are ready," Ethan said. "I will wait as long as you need." As winter deepened, and December gave way to January of 1883, Violet and Ethan settled into married life with surprising ease. They learned each other's habits and rhythms, the small domestic intimacies that make up a shared life. Ethan rose before dawn to oversee the ranch work, and Violet often woke with him, making coffee and breakfast before he headed out into the cold. She continued her work helping Martha, though the older woman now insisted she rest more frequently. And the evening lessons continued with Ethan sitting beside her now instead of in the back, his presence a steady comfort. True to his word, Ethan was patient with Violet, never pushing for more than she was willing to give. But gradually their relationship deepened, moving from affection and respect to something that burned warmer. They kissed often, long, slow kisses that left them both wanting more. They touched freely, Ethan's hands learning the changing shape of Violet's body, her hands exploring the strong muscles of his back and shoulders. And finally, on a night when the wind howled outside and the cabin was warm with stove heat, they came together fully as husband and wife. Ethan was gentle and attentive, careful of Violet's pregnant body, focused on her pleasure before his own. Violet had not known it could be like this, tender and mutual and full of care. Her experience with Charles had been quick and selfish, leaving her confused about what she had been told marriage intimacy should be. But this, with Ethan, felt right in a way that eased old wounds and made her feel whole again. Afterward, lying tangled together in the narrow bed, Violet felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were good tears, healing tears. Ethan kissed them away and held her close, whispering that he loved her, that she was his wife and he was glad of it, that they would build a good life together. "I love you too," Violet said, the words coming easily now. "I did not think I would ever say that to anyone again, but I do. I love you, Ethan." The baby came in early February, arriving 3 weeks before Violet had expected. She woke in the middle of the night with pains in her back and belly. And by the time Ethan had run to fetch Martha, the contractions were coming hard and fast. Martha took charge with the calm efficiency of a woman who had birthed 3 children of her own and helped with countless others, sending Ethan to boil water and fetch clean linens while she examined Violet and assured her that everything was progressing normally. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Violet had not imagined such pain was possible, had not known that her body could be torn apart and remade this way. She clung to Ethan's hand when Martha allowed him back into the room, crushing his fingers while she pushed and screamed and cursed the day she had ever met Charles Whitmore. Ethan bore it all without complaint, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement, telling her she was strong and brave and doing wonderfully. Finally, as the winter sun was setting on the second evening, the baby came in a rush of blood and fluid and Martha's triumphant cry. Violet collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted beyond measure, and heard the thin, angry wail of her child taking its first breath. "It is a boy," Martha announced, wrapping the baby in a clean blanket and checking him over with practiced hands. "A good size, healthy lungs, all his fingers and toes. He is perfect, Victoria." She placed the baby in Violet's arms and Violet looked down at the tiny red face, the shock of dark hair, the eyes that were squeezed shut against the assault of light and air. Her son, her child. The life she had suffered for and fled for and built a new existence to protect. "Hello, little one," she whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming. "I am your mother and I love you so much." Ethan leaned over her shoulder, looking at the baby with an expression of absolute wonder. "He is beautiful," he said softly. "What should we name him?" Violet had been thinking about this for weeks. She wanted a name that would connect the baby to Ethan to cement his place as the child's father. "What was your father's name?" she asked. "Thomas," Ethan said. "Thomas James Zimmerman. He died when I was 12, but he was a good man." "Then we will call him Thomas," Violet decided. "Thomas James Zimmerman after his grandfather, Tommy." Ethan's eyes filled with tears and he kissed Violet's forehead, then gently touched the baby's cheek with one calloused finger. "Welcome to the world, Tommy. I am your papa and I will take care of you always." Martha stayed for several days, helping Violet recover from the birth and teaching her how to nurse the baby, how to change him and bathe him and soothe him when he cried. Ethan took to fatherhood with the same steady competence he brought to everything else, rising in the night to bring the baby to Violet for feeding, walking the floor with Tommy when he was fussy, changing dirty cloths without complaint. Watching him with their son, Violet felt her heart swell with love so fierce it was almost painful. This man who had found her dying in the desert had given her everything: safety, purpose, family, love. He had asked nothing in return except that she let him stand beside her, and that seemed like the greatest gift of all. As winter gave way to spring and Tommy grew from a tiny newborn to a chubby, alert baby, life on the Bar 7 settled into new patterns. Violet was busy now with motherhood, but she still helped Martha when she could and still held the reading lessons 2 evenings a week, with Tommy sleeping in a basket beside her or nursing contentedly while she guided the men through their texts. The ranch hands adored Tommy, taking turns holding him and making ridiculous faces to win his smiles. Old Hank carved him a set of wooden animals that became treasured toys. Jimmy, the youngest hand, was fascinated by the baby and often volunteered to watch him so Violet could have a break, sitting with Tommy in his lap and reading to him in a halting voice that improved notably over the months. In late April, a rider came to the Bar 7 with news from Socorro. He was a circuit rider who delivered mail and news to the scattered ranches, and he carried telegrams and newspapers from the larger towns. Samuel invited him to dinner, and the man regaled them with stories of cattle prices and politics, of conflicts with Apache raiders to the south, of the railroad expansion that was slowly connecting New Mexico territory to the wider world. As the talk continued, the rider mentioned almost casually that there had been some excitement in Santa Fe, something about a prominent banker who had lost his mind after his daughter disappeared. The man had been making wild accusations about thieves and fallen women, had driven away most of his business with his erratic behavior, and had finally sold his bank at a loss and moved back east to Boston where he had family. Violet felt the blood drain from her face. She excused herself quickly, claiming the baby needed her, and retreated to the cabin with Tommy clutched against her chest. Ethan followed her a few minutes later, finding her sitting in the rocking chair by the window, staring out at the gathering dusk. "That was about your father, was it not?" he asked gently. Violet nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Ethan knelt beside the rocking chair and took her free hand in his. "He is gone now. He cannot hurt you anymore. You are safe here, Victoria. You and Tommy both." "I never wanted him to suffer," Violet said, her voice breaking. "I just wanted to be free of him. I wanted to save my baby, but I destroyed him in the process." "No," Ethan said firmly. "He destroyed himself with his pride and his inability to love you more than his reputation. You did what you had to do to survive. That is not wrong, that is courage." "I feel like I should grieve," Violet admitted. "He was my father, but all I feel is relief that he is far away and cannot find me now." "Then feel relief," Ethan said. "You do not owe him your grief when he never gave you his love, not the kind that matters. He had a chance to be a father to you, and he chose his pride instead. That was his failure, not yours." Violet looked at him, at this man who understood her so completely, who had shown her what real love looked like. "How did I get so lucky as to find you?" she asked. "I was the lucky one," Ethan replied, reaching up to touch her face. "You and Tommy are the best things that ever happened to me. I thank God for that day I found you on the road, even though you were half dead and should have terrified any sensible man into riding the other direction." Violet laughed despite herself, the tension breaking. "I must have been a sight." "You were beautiful," Ethan said seriously. "Stubborn and fierce and beautiful. You still are." That night, after Tommy was asleep in his cradle, Violet told Ethan the whole truth. She told him her real name, told him about her father's bank and her privileged upbringing, about the mansion in Santa Fe and the private tutors, and the expectations that she would marry well and elevate the family's social standing. She told him about Charles Whitmore in more detail, about how charming he had been, how he had courted her at parties and in her father's study, how he had seemed so sophisticated and worldly, how he had seduced her with promises of love and marriage. She told him about discovering she was pregnant, about Charles disappearing, about her father's rage and the discovery that Charles had stolen from the bank. She told him about the Magdalene Asylum in St. Louis, about her father's cold pronouncement that she would give birth and surrender the baby and never speak of it again. She told him about fleeing in the night, about the terror of those days walking in the desert, about accepting that she might die but choosing death over surrender. Ethan listened to all of it without interrupting, his expression growing darker as she described her father's cruelty, but softening when she spoke of her fear for Tommy and her determination to protect him. When she finished, he pulled her into his arms and held her tightly. "Thank you for trusting me with this," he said. "Your secrets are safe with me, all of them, but I want you to know that you do not have to hide anymore. Violet or Victoria, Lancaster or Zimmerman, you are my wife and I am proud to call you that. You are not defined by what happened to you, or by the mistakes of others. You are the woman who walked across the desert to save her child. You are the woman who teaches cowboys to read in the evening and grows vegetables and makes this cabin a home. You are the woman I love, and that is all that matters." Violet kissed him then, deep and grateful, pouring all her emotion into it. They made love slowly and thoroughly, reaffirming their commitment to each other, and afterward Violet felt a peace she had not known she was missing. The truth was out now, shared with the one person who mattered most, and she was still loved, still safe, still home. Summer came to New Mexico territory in a blaze of heat and long golden days. Tommy thrived, growing chubby and cheerful, beginning to sit up on his own and reaching for everything within range. He had Violet's dark hair, but his eyes were changing to a blue-green that reminded everyone of Ethan, a genetic coincidence that no one questioned, because why would they? Tommy was Ethan's son, raised by him and loved by him, and any physical resemblance was simply good fortune. Violet had never been happier. She loved her small life with its simple routines and honest work. She loved Martha and Samuel, who had become like parents to her. She loved the ranch hands who respected her and treated her as one of their own. Most of all, she loved Ethan, loved the life they were building together, the family they were creating. In August, as she was helping Martha preserve tomatoes from the garden, Violet realized she had not had her monthly courses in over 2 months. The realization brought her up short, her hands stilling in their work. She placed one hand on her belly, which was still flat, and tried to calculate when it might have happened. Sometime in June, she thought, during those hot nights when she and Ethan had reached for each other with increasing passion, both of them more confident in their physical relationship now. Martha noticed her distraction and looked at her with knowing eyes. "Are you going to tell me, or shall I guess?" the older woman asked with a smile. Violet felt herself blushing. "I think I might be expecting again." Martha laughed delightedly and pulled Violet into a hug. "That is wonderful news." "Does Ethan know?" "Not yet. I only just realized myself. I was not expecting it so soon after Tommy." "It happens that way sometimes," Martha said. "My second came only 10 months after my first. You will have your hands full with 2 little ones so close together, but it is a blessing nonetheless." Violet told Ethan that evening after they had put Tommy to bed. She watched his face carefully, unsure how he would react. They had not talked about having more children, had not planned for this. But the moment she said the words, Ethan's face lit up with pure joy. "Truly, we are having a baby." "Yes," Violet said, laughing at his reaction. "Our baby this time made together." Ethan swept her up in his arms and spun her around, careful even in his excitement not to be too rough. "This is the best news. Tommy will have a brother or sister to grow up with. You have made me the happiest man in all of New Mexico territory. You are not worried about the responsibility, about another mouth to feed." "Never," Ethan said firmly. "I make good money as foreman and we are careful with our funds. We will manage just fine. And besides, what is the point of all this, of working hard and building a life, if not to fill it with family and love?" The pregnancy progressed easily, much easier than with Tommy. Violet felt well and strong, and she continued her work through the fall and into the early winter, only slowing down when she became too ungainly to move comfortably. Tommy was walking now, toddling around the cabin and getting into everything, and Violet spent much of her time chasing after him while Ethan worked the ranch. In March of 1884, their second son was born, this time with a much shorter labor that left Violet exhausted but not shattered. Ethan was there from start to finish, supporting her through the contractions, catching his son when he finally emerged into the world. The baby was smaller than Tommy had been, with light brown hair and eyes that would clearly be blue. "He looks like you," Violet said, cradling the baby against her chest while Ethan cleaned them both up, Martha having stepped out to give them privacy. "I was hoping he would look like you," Ethan said, "but I will take it. What shall we name him?" Violet had thought about this too. She wanted to honor the people who had helped them, who had made their life possible. What about Samuel? Samuel Ethan Zimmerman, after the man who gave us a home and the father who has loved these boys as his own. Ethan's eyes went bright with unshed tears. "Samuel Brooks will be honored. And I am honored that you want to give our son my name." Baby Samuel, who quickly became Sammy to distinguish him from the elder Samuel, was as different from Tommy as two brothers could be. Where Tommy was bold and adventurous, constantly trying to escape the cabin and explore, Sammy was calm and observant, content to sit and watch the world around him. Tommy had been a colicky baby who cried often. Sammy rarely fussed and slept through the night almost from the beginning. "He is too easy," Violet joked to Martha. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop." "Some babies are just peaceful souls," Martha replied. "Enjoy it while you can. Once he starts walking, he will probably give you as much trouble as Tommy does." Life with two small children was exhausting but fulfilling. Violet's days were full of feeding and changing and cleaning, of breaking up fights between the boys as they grew and began to interact, of teaching Tommy his letters and numbers while Sammy watched from his place on the floor. Ethan helped as much as his work allowed, coming home every evening to a house full of noise and activity, greeting his family with genuine joy. The years passed in a steady rhythm of seasons and growth. Tommy started school in Los Alamos when he turned 6, making the ride there and back each day with several other children from the surrounding ranches. Sammy followed 2 years later, and Violet found herself with time during the days to help Martha more extensively again, and to take on some bookkeeping work for the ranch that Samuel gratefully turned over to her. She had discovered she had a head for numbers and organization, and she helped Samuel streamline his record keeping and find ways to increase efficiency. Her work was valuable enough that Samuel insisted on paying her extra for it, money that Violet and Ethan saved carefully, planning for the future, for the boys' education, for whatever might come. In the summer of 1889, when Tommy was 6 and Sammy was 4, a man came to the bar 7 asking questions. He was a Pinkerton agent, hired by someone back east to locate a missing woman. He had a photograph, old and somewhat faded, showing a young woman in an expensive dress standing in front of a mansion. Samuel came to find Violet where she was working in the garden with the boys playing nearby. His expression was serious, and she knew immediately that something was wrong. "There is a man here asking questions," Samuel said quietly. "He has a photograph of a woman named Violet Lancaster who disappeared from Santa Fe 7 years ago. The photograph looks a bit like you might have looked when you were younger." Violet felt her stomach drop. After all this time, someone was still looking for her. "Who hired him?" she asked. "He says a lawyer in Boston hired him on behalf of a family member. Apparently your father died last year and his estate is in probate. There is a substantial inheritance that cannot be distributed until it is determined what happened to you." Violet stood slowly, brushing dirt from her hands. She looked at her sons, at Tommy, who was helping Sammy dig in the dirt, both of them sun-browned and healthy and happy. She looked at the ranch that had become her home, at the life she had built here, and she thought about the ghost of her old life finally catching up to her, demanding acknowledgement. "What do you want to do?" Samuel asked. "I can send him away." "Tell him we have never heard of anyone named Violet Lancaster." "No," Violet said slowly. "I think it is time to stop hiding. I will talk to him." She found Ethan first, told him what was happening. His first instinct was to refuse to let the agent near her, but Violet laid a hand on his arm and shook her head. "If there is an inheritance, it could help us provide for the boys. Send them to good schools. Give them opportunities we could not otherwise afford." "And I am tired of living in fear, Ethan. I want to face this and be done with it." The Pinkerton agent was a professional, neither judgmental nor sympathetic, simply interested in facts. Violet confirmed her identity, explained that she had left Santa Fe of her own free will, that she had married and built a new life, and had no interest in returning east or claiming any social position she might have held in her father's world. The agent made notes, asked questions about how to reach her if necessary, and said he would report back to the lawyer in Boston. 6 weeks later, a letter arrived from a law firm in Massachusetts. Violet opened it with trembling hands, Ethan reading over her shoulder. The letter explained that Edmund Lancaster had died of a heart ailment, that his estate had been substantial despite the loss of the bank, and that after various bequests to charities, the remainder was to be divided between his surviving children. As his only child, Violet was entitled to the full residuary estate, which amounted to nearly $40,000. The letter went on to say that there were some conditions. She would need to provide proof of identity and marriage, and she would need to sign documents acknowledging that she made no claim on the Lancaster name or any social obligations that might have been attached to it. The lawyers made it clear that the family who had taken in Edmund Lancaster in Boston wanted nothing to do with his scandalous daughter, and were only following the letter of his will because they were obligated to do so. Violet read the letter twice, then handed it to Ethan and walked outside, needing air. She stood on the porch of their cabin, looking out at the ranch where she had found safety and love, and tried to process what this meant. Ethan joined her a few minutes later, slipping an arm around her waist. $40,000, he said quietly. "That is more money than most people see in a lifetime." "He left it to me," Violet said, her voice bewildered. "After everything, after disowning me and calling me a whore, he still left me his money." "Perhaps he regretted it at the end," Ethan suggested. "Perhaps he realized what he had lost when he drove you away." "Or perhaps it was just the habit of a lifetime," Violet replied. "He was always meticulous about his estate planning. I was his child and his heir, and that was simply a fact to him, separate from whatever emotion he felt or did not feel." "What do you want to do?" Ethan asked. Violet thought about it carefully. She thought about the years of scraping by, of careful economies and plans deferred. She thought about Tommy's quick mind and Sammy's thoughtful nature, about the education they deserved. She thought about Ethan working hard every day, about how he had never once complained about the burden of supporting a family on a foreman's wages. "I want to accept it," she said. "I want to take his money and use it to build something good. We could buy land, start our own ranch. We could make sure the boys go to college if they want to. We could help Martha and Samuel in their old age, repay them for everything they have done for us. We could take something that was built on pride and reputation and turn it into something real and useful." "Then that is what we will do," Ethan said. "We will write to the lawyers tomorrow and begin the process." It took nearly 6 months to finalize everything, to provide the necessary documentation, to sign the papers that released the inheritance. The money was transferred to a bank in Albuquerque, where Violet and Ethan opened an account, and they began making plans for their future. They found land for sale about 20 miles northwest of the Bar 7, a good-sized spread with water rights and decent grazing. The property had a small house that needed work but was structurally sound, and enough acreage to run a significant herd. They bought it outright, no debt, and spent the winter of 1890 preparing to move, with Samuel's blessing and his promise that they could always count on the Bar 7 as friends and allies. In the spring of 1891, the Zimmerman family moved to their own ranch, which they named the Double Z. Tommy was 8 now, Sammy 6, both of them excited about the adventure of a new home. Ethan hired 3 hands to help work the cattle, men he had known for years and trusted. Violet threw herself into making the house a home, painting and sewing curtains and planting a garden. They worked hard that first year, building up the herd, improving the property, establishing themselves as serious ranchers. Violet managed the books and the household, negotiated with buyers, kept track of every penny spent and earned. Ethan ran the cattle operation with skill and dedication, earning respect from neighboring ranchers and building a reputation for fair dealing. In the autumn of 1891, Violet realized she was pregnant again. She was 30 now, and this pregnancy was harder than the previous 2, leaving her tired and sick for weeks. But Ethan was endlessly patient, taking on extra household duties, keeping the boys occupied and out of her way. Martha came to stay with them for the last month, helping manage the house and prepare for the birth. Their daughter was born in January of 1892, arriving in the middle of a snowstorm that left them isolated on the ranch for 3 days. Martha and Ethan delivered the baby together, working efficiently through a long and difficult labor. When the baby finally came, small and red and furiously angry at being born, Violet held her daughter and wept with relief and joy. "What shall we name her?" Ethan asked, cradling both his wife and daughter in his arms. "I want to name her Martha," Violet said, looking at the older woman who had become like a mother to her. "Martha Rebecca Zimmerman, after the woman who saved me and the sister you lost, if that is all right with both of you." Martha wiped her eyes and nodded, too overcome to speak. Ethan kissed Violet's forehead and then the baby's, his expression full of love. "It is perfect," he said. "Welcome to the family, Martha Rebecca." Little Martha, who would always be Marty to her family, grew up wild and free on the Double Z, adored by her older brothers and doted on by her parents. She had Violet's dark hair and Ethan's blue-green eyes, and from an early age she showed a fierce independence that both amused and occasionally terrified her mother. The ranch prospered over the years that followed. Ethan's skill with cattle and Violet's business acumen made them successful, and the Double Z became known throughout the territory as a well-run operation with quality stock. They bought more land when it became available, expanded their herd, built a new and larger house when the original became too cramped for their growing family. Tommy proved to have a gift for training horses and took over that aspect of the ranch operation as soon as he was old enough. Sammy was fascinated by the mechanics of ranching, always inventing new tools or better ways of doing things, and Ethan encouraged his innovations. Marty, as the youngest, often tagged along with her father and brothers, learning to ride and rope as well as any boy, much to Violet's resigned amusement. In 1895, Violet discovered she was pregnant once more, a surprise given that she was now 34 and had not expected to have more children. This pregnancy was different from the others, harder on her body, and she spent much of it resting under doctor's orders. Ethan hovered anxiously, and the children were unusually well behaved, sensing that their mother needed to be careful. In March of 1896, Violet gave birth to twin boys, smaller than her other babies but healthy and strong. The labor was mercifully quick, and when it was over, Violet found herself looking at two identical sons with light hair and blue eyes who howled in unison. "Lord have mercy," Ethan breathed, staring at the twins. "What do we do with two of them at once?" "Love them twice as much," Violet replied, exhausted but happy. "And hope they are better behaved than their older brother and sister combined." They named the twins Daniel and David, simple, strong names that would serve them well. The boys were indeed identical, so much so that even Violet sometimes had trouble telling them apart until they developed different personalities, Daniel more serious and Daniel more playful. The entire family pitched in to help with the twins, Tommy and Sammy taking turns rocking babies. Marty, now 4, appointed herself assistant mother and took her duties very seriously. The house was chaos for the next few years, full of noise and activity and the constant demands of small children. But it was joyful chaos, the kind that comes from a family that loves each other deeply. Violet sometimes looked around her dinner table at Ethan and their 5 children, at the life they had built together, and had to pinch herself to believe it was real. Martha Brooks, the elder, passed away peacefully in her sleep in the winter of 1897, and the entire family mourned her loss. They took young Marty to the funeral in Los Alamos, wanting her to understand that she had been named for someone important, someone who had made a difference in many lives. Samuel Brooks continued to run the Bar 7 with the help of his sons, but he was aging and spent more time visiting the Double Z, sitting on the porch with Ethan and talking about cattle and weather and old times. Tommy left home in 1899 to attend agricultural college in Colorado, determined to bring modern ranching techniques back to New Mexico. He promised to return after his studies, and Violet believed him, could see in his eyes that the Double Z was in his blood the same way it was in hers. Sammy, now 15, took over Tommy's responsibilities with the horses and thrived. In the autumn of 1900, as the century turned and a new era began, Ethan and Violet celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary. The children threw them a party, decorating the house and preparing a special dinner, even the twins, now 4, helping with simple tasks. After the celebration, when the children were finally asleep, Ethan and Violet sat together on the porch, looking out at the ranch they had built. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked quietly. "Choosing this life instead of the one you were born to?" Violet turned to look at him, at the man who had found her dying in the desert and offered her everything. His face was weathered now, lined by years of sun and hard work, his dark hair touched with silver. But his eyes were the same, that startling blue-green that had captured her heart, and they looked at her with the same devotion they always had. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "That life would have killed me, Ethan, or killed everything good in me. But this life, the one we built together, has made me more than I ever could have been otherwise. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "You saved me too," Ethan replied. "I was just going through the motions before I met you, working and existing but not really living. You and the children, you gave me purpose and joy. You made me into the man I always wanted to be." They kissed then, long and slow, the kiss of two people who had weathered storms together and come out stronger. When they parted, Violet rested her head on Ethan's shoulder and felt his arm come around her, solid and secure. "What do you think the future holds?" she asked. "I think our children will do great things," Ethan said. "Tommy will modernize ranching in this territory. Sammy will invent something that changes how we work. Marty will probably run for governor and win. And the twins, well, heaven only knows what they will get up to, but it will be interesting. Violet laughed. And us? We will grow old together on this ranch we built, Ethan said. We will watch our children grow and thrive. We will hold grandchildren someday. We will sit on this porch when we are ancient and tell stories about the old days. We will love each other until our last breath and beyond. That sounds perfect, Violet said softly, and it was perfect, or as close to perfect as life ever gets. There were hard times still to come. Years of drought and cattle diseases, the challenges of aging and the pain of watching their children make their own mistakes. Samuel Brooks passed away in 1902, and they mourned the loss of a father figure and friend. Tommy married a woman he met at college and brought her home to help run the ranch, giving Violet her first grandchild in 1904. Sammy proved his inventive nature by developing a better windmill design that brought water to previously unusable land, making him wealthy in his own right. Marty grew up fierce and independent, eventually becoming a teacher and fighting for women's rights in the territory. The twins were inseparable, eventually buying their own small ranch and running it together. Through all of it, Ethan and Violet remained the center of their family, the foundation on which everything else was built. They worked side by side, aged side by side, loved side by side. Violet never forgot the girl she had been, desperate and pregnant and fleeing into the desert. But that girl felt like someone from another lifetime, a different person entirely from the woman she had become. In 1918, as Violet sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the New Mexico sky in shades of gold and crimson, she reflected on the life she had lived. She was 57 now, her dark hair more gray than black, her hands gnarled with arthritis. Ethan was 63, moving slower than he once had but still active, still working the ranch with their sons. Around them, 7 grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter filling the air. Tommy's eldest son was already talking about going to college like his father. Marty's daughter had inherited her mother's fierce spirit and her grandmother's head for numbers. The twins each had 2 children who were as inseparable as their fathers had been. And Sammy's son showed early signs of the same inventive genius that had made his father successful. This was the legacy she and Ethan had built together, not just the land and the cattle and the successful ranch, but this sprawling, noisy, loving family. It had begun with a desperate flight and an unlikely rescue, with a cowboy who offered his name to a woman he barely knew, with a choice to trust and to love when trust and love seemed impossible. Ethan joined her on the porch, moving slowly now but still steady, still strong. He sat in the rocking chair beside hers and took her hand in his, their fingers interlacing with the ease of decades of practice. "Good day," he asked. "The best," Violet replied. "Although I think Marty's daughter is going to be trouble. She reminds me too much of myself at that age." Ethan laughed. "God help us all then. One of you was challenging enough." They sat in companionable silence, watching the sun set and the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky. The sounds of the ranch settled around them, familiar and comforting, cattle lowing in the distance, horses nickering in the barn, children being called in for supper. "I love you," Violet said quietly. "Thank you for finding me that day. Thank you for every day since." "I love you too," Ethan replied. "Thank you for letting me find you. Thank you for choosing this life with me." The desert night deepened around them, cool and vast and full of stars. Inside the house, their children and grandchildren gathered for dinner, their voices rising in laughter and conversation. And on the porch, Two people who had found each other against all odds held hands and watched the sky, grateful for every moment they had been given, for every choice that had led them to this place, for the love that had transformed two broken people into something whole and strong and enduring. This was their happily ever after, not perfect but real, not easy but worth every struggle. It had begun with a pregnant woman fleeing into the desert and a humble cowboy who offered his name instead of judgment. It had grown into something beautiful, a family, a legacy, a love story that would be told by their descendants for generations to come. And as the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, as the desert wind whispered through the scrub brush, and the cattle settled for the night, Violet Lancaster Zimmerman knew that she had found exactly what she had been searching for all those years ago when she fled into the unknown. She had found home, she had found love, she had found herself, and that, more than any fortune or social position she had been born to, was worth everything.